You know, every law you follow, every single headline about an election, every global crisis you see on the news, it all comes back to one thing: power. And today, we're pulling back the curtain on the science that studies it: political science. So let's just start with the biggest question of all: who's really in charge? Is it the people we vote for? Or maybe the giant corporations that drive our economy? The media that shapes what we think? Or hey, is it us? Answering that question, well, it changes everything about how you see the world. So, to figure that out, we're going to go on a bit of a journey. We'll start way back in ancient Greece. Then we'll jump to the modern day to get our definition straight. We'll map out where to even look for politics, check out its four main lenses of analysis, and then wrap up with the biggest question of all: why does any of this actually matter to you? Okay, so first, let's rewind the clock way back. Because these big questions we're asking today about power and who gets to make the rules, they're not new, not at all. In fact, people have been wrestling with them for thousands of years. This whole thing really gets started in places like ancient Greece, where you had these brilliant thinkers, guys like Plato and Aristotle, who were the first to really systematically break down how a state works. Now, their ideas kept evolving through the medieval period, but it wasn't until the late 1800s that political science finally got its own department in universities, separate from history or philosophy. In this quote right here, from the man they call the father of political science, Aristotle, just nails the core idea. When he said, "Man is by nature a political animal," he wasn't talking about political parties or elections. He meant that we are fundamentally social creatures. We live in communities, a polis in Greek, and it's just in our DNA to figure out how to govern ourselves and get along. All right, so we know where it comes from, but that brings us to the next obvious question. When we talk about political science today, what are we actually studying? What's in the box? So here's the official definition. It's the field that systematically examines government, politics, and political behavior. Now, the most important word on this slide, the one I really want you to grab onto, is systematically. This isn't just about arguing opinions. It's about having a method, a rigorous, almost scientific way of figuring out what's really going on. So, how do political scientists do that? Well, they have a whole toolkit. It includes empirical research, and that just means digging into real-world data, like tracking voting patterns or protest movements. They use case studies, where they'll go super deep on one single event, like a revolution, to understand it inside and out. They build theories to create frameworks that help explain why things happen the way they do. And underpinning all of it is critical thinking, always questioning assumptions and always looking for the evidence. Okay, so now we know how it's studied. Let's talk about where political scientists look. You might think politics is just what happens in those big, fancy government buildings, right? But the truth is, it's pretty much everywhere. We can kind of break this huge scope into three main buckets. First, you have government. That's the formal machinery, the institutions, the laws on the books. Then you have politics, and that's the messy, real-world game of how people actually compete for power within that machinery. And finally, you've got political behavior, and that's us. Why do we vote for who we vote for? What makes someone join a social movement? This is what connects the huge structures to our individual lives. Now, because that scope is just so incredibly wide, the discipline is organized into a few specialized branches. I want you to think of them like different camera lenses, where each one is designed to bring a very specific part of the political world into razor-sharp focus. And these are the big four. Political theory asks those timeless philosophical questions. What is justice? What is freedom, really? It's the foundation. Then comparative politics looks at how different countries try to answer those questions. Why does democracy flourish in one place and fail in another? International relations zooms way out to look at the whole global chessboard. How do countries deal with each other through trade, war, and diplomacy? And finally, public administration zooms right in and asks, okay, once a law is passed, how does the government actually get it done? How do all those gears of bureaucracy really turn? So, we've covered the history, the definition, the different parts, but this brings us to the most important section of all. Forget the classroom for a second. Why does any of this actually matter out here, in the real world? Yeah, let's make this personal. We've thrown a lot of academic ideas at you, but what's the real-world payoff? What does understanding political science actually do for you, in your life? It's really all about empowerment. It gives you the blueprint to see how your society is actually run, not just how people say it's supposed to run. It helps you connect the dots between your vote, a new law in your town, and a global trade agreement. And maybe most importantly, it gives you the tools to cut through all the noise, to analyze the world based on evidence, not just emotion. It turns you from a passive spectator into an informed, active citizen.
When you put it all together, political science isn't just another subject in a textbook. It's a comprehensive toolkit. It gives you what you need to understand and navigate this incredibly complex political world we live in, connecting everything from your local school board election all the way up to global diplomacy.
So, we've given you the basic toolkit of political analysis, the history, the methods, the different lenses to look through. Now, the real work starts. We're going to leave you with this question. With these new tools in your hand, how are you going to see the political world differently?